welcome to the beginning of day 2 of the SHIELD Global Online Safety Conference. I am very excited about how this day is starting. We have Nakshatra that's joining from Australia, and she is a cybercriminologist, academic, and digital safety speaker, and co-founder of the tech consultancy Iris. And I just love about so many of our speakers that they have kind of a non-traditional background, and I'm really looking forward to what you have to say and what we can learn from your perspective on online safety. So thanks for being here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, first of all, to Angeline and all the sponsors of the SHIELD Global Online Safety Conference. This is a wonderful opportunity. My name is Nakshatra Suresh, and I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land on which I meet you today. For me, it is the Darug people of the Eora Nation on whose lands I live and work. I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and extend that to anyone who has joined us at the conference today. Please feel free to drop in the chat where you are joining from and the name of the custodians of your land to acknowledge their continued connection to the country. Today, I will discuss how we amplify the digital safety movement using criminological perspectives. This talk aims to cover what I have seen in both my capacity as a founder, but also as a criminologist, over the last 2 years, what I have seen with particular reference to online harms and cybercrimes. Before I start, I'd like to note that this session will only cover general information, research, and insights. None of the information provided to you during this session is intended to offer legal, financial, business, information technology, or any other professional advice. I also note that this session will cover topics surrounding mental health, suicide, and abuse, which may be triggering for some individuals. Please ensure to do what is right for you, including disengaging from this talk and contacting your local helplines for further assistance. A little bit about me. So I am a cybercriminologist, as Angeline mentioned before. I am a digital and tech safety public speaker and an academic at the University of New South Wales. I'm also the co-founder of Iris, a safety tech consultancy that focuses on helping startups, universities, and small to medium businesses think about human-centered design, safety by design, and social science principles to reduce harm when deploying their products and their services. We also provide education and training around digital safety, combating cybercrime, and unpacking artificial intelligence to generate greater social impact. If you're interested in any of these for your organizations, please get in touch. We do have a booth at the virtual fair at the conference where you can check out more of our work, including our website and our social medias. Now, you might be wondering, why is this topic even important? What is the relationship between digital safety and cybercrime? With rapidly evolving technology, this means that you need to equip yourselves and your organizations to be prepared for evolutions in the internet, including language, vernacular, and the experiences of those who are most vulnerable to experiencing the harms of the digital world. Considering digital safety from a variety of perspectives will allow for us to understand how various disciplines can create larger, multifaceted approaches to solving the issues at hand. I am a strong advocate for having more criminologists on board to identify and problem solve what we see, which are risks and gaps in individual systems and institutions. However, while there is no one-size-fits-all solution for these issues, each and every victim survivor's experience is unique and requires tailored approaches. Every country has differing laws, regulations, and policies governing cybercrime, which means that there is a wide variety of approaches that stakeholders can adopt based on the region in which they operate. Now, I keep talking about harms, and you might be wondering, what is the difference between a harm and a crime? Well, in simple terms, a harm is something that may be perceived as having social, economic, or environmental damages. It can be intentional or unintentional, and may be as a consequence of a crime. A crime, which often begins as a harm, goes through bureaucratic institutions and is finally legislated by the government as violating the law. With regards to cybercrime, the blurring of public, private, professional, and personal lives on social medias has contributed to the perceptions of cyber abuse as a trivial crime and often an underrepresented harm. What is cybercrime, and subsequently, what is cybercriminology? So, cybercrimes are generally referred to as illegal or unlawful activities that are either directed at a computer, its networks, or network devices, or perpetrated using these devices. It is interesting to consider cybercrime from the perspective that it can either be vulnerable due to its technical vulnerabilities in its form of a computer or a device, or that the person that is using it, which could be a child, adult, perpetrator, or victim. Most people assume that cybercrimes have required access to the internet, but this is incorrect. In France in 1834, attackers stole financial market information by accessing the telegraph system. Over the course of the 19th and 20th century, both definitions and perpetration of cybercrimes have changed and evolved with the introduction of emails, the internet, and now we're aiming to solve this crisis through the expansion to artificial intelligence, cryptocurrencies, and immersive realities. The discipline of cybercriminology is relatively new in comparison to other forms of criminology. As cybercriminologists, it is our responsibilities to look at the factors that influence individuals to either perpetrate or be susceptible to cybercrime. Where this ties in closely with digital safety is our ability to recognize the failures of the criminal justice system and institutions in upholding the rights of individuals when they are using and interacting with technology. Through our research and analysis, many of us are able to identify cases where cases have gone wrong and aim to identify who needs to be held accountable or responsible for failing to meet the minimum standards of care required in digital settings. I'm going to briefly cover some particular cybercrimes, especially those that have been discussed over this conference, as well as relevant to today's digital safety landscape. Deepfakes refer to the creation and distribution of artificially generated and often intimate images, videos, and sounds of individuals. Individuals often use generative artificial intelligence to create deepfakes, whether malicious, sexual, or not, and distribute these through multiple telecommunications and internet channels. These images, while fake, are also highly realistic to the human eye. What was originally defined as image-based abuse now also includes deepfake abuse, as cybercriminals are now able to manipulate seemingly normal photos of individuals in order to extort and blackmail for economic, physical, and psychological control over their victims. While this is not my area of expertise, I am acutely aware that synthetic child sexual abuse material is rampant. The ability to create and possess exploitative material that involves minors and young people is becoming increasingly accessible, especially in schools, and this number is rising in the millions. Similar to deepfake abuse, the perpetration of this horrific crime is truly an example of how the most vulnerable of our society are now being left to fend for themselves online. Applications that nudify individuals are very popular in today's age. I know there are many experts and advocates in this space who are speaking at the conference about this, and I am incredibly grateful for their work. Disinformation refers to false information that is purposely distributed to create negative and harmful narratives. It should not be mistaken for misinformation, which does not have malicious intent. Generative AI is notorious for creating false news content and non-existent citations, which are highly likely to mislead any viewers or readers of content, especially with the rise of fake websites, AI-generated videos of individuals like deepfakes, and insider social media accounts that can amplify the distribution of disinformation. In the hands of malicious actors, disinformation has risen drastically across the world. Alongside the previously mentioned deepfakes, disinformation during election periods encourages the tarnishing of reputations of politicians and high-profile figures. The majority of the global population are unable to recognize the differences between the real and the altered text, images, or audio that has been shared or distributed in online spaces. In Australia in particular, over 40% of the Australian population have insufficient ability to recognize disinformation when presented with it online. Technology-facilitated abuse is an umbrella term that covers numerous forms of abuse that is perpetrated using technology. This includes image-based abuse, deepfake abuse, cyberstalking, spyware, cyberbullying, etc. It disproportionately affects women and those with intersectional identities even further. From a criminal justice perspective, a lack of appropriate legislation governing technology-facilitated abuse creates a barrier for victims who have to prove the extent of their fear and emotions to law enforcement as well as the court. The esoteric nature of cybercrime and its definitions means that harms are perceived differently by law enforcement authorities, with the recurring issue of victim blaming and criticism of the victim and their failure to adopt appropriate protective behaviors. Often the outcome is dire and victim survivors do not receive justice. Victim survivors of technology-facilitated abuse not only undergo some of the most horrific experiences with the criminal justice system, but in most countries, incidents are not reported. Often they are left to fend for themselves. As such, there is no recent data that identifies the exact number of victim survivors of technology-facilitated abuse, as there is severe underreporting. The rise of frauds and scams in the last few years are due to artificial intelligence, and these models understanding how to create hyper-realistic sounding emails and messages which target those who are both digitally literate and mostly those who are not, including the elderly population and those who belong to culturally and linguistically diverse groups. AI can modify malicious code in real time to evade traditional detection systems, making malware more adaptive and effective. Deepfakes, scams, and frauds are also included in this category. A UK engineering firm fell victim to a deepfake scam where one of their employees sent over £20 million to criminals who had utilized generative AI video recording software. Similarly, a cybersecurity firm, SlashNext, highlighted 1,265% increase in malicious email phishing in Australia when ChatGPT entered the scene. Since the launch of accessible generative AI, it has fueled more convincing scams and frauds at a massive scale. While some forms of fraud and scam are criminalized, the legislation has not caught up to AI-generated frauds and scams, which may change the context in which some of these situations might be defined. I personally highly encourage you to stay up to date with these crime types and trends as they may be criminalized in the near future, depending on the region that you are part of. For you, as a stakeholder with a vested interest in the digital safety movement, it is important for you to understand the criminology behind common cybercrimes. Understanding some of the theories and motivation for cybercriminals and malicious threat actors may evoke a new perspective or possible solution that you may be able to consider for your work. I've only covered a few here briefly, as a lot of them do go into deeper psychological frameworks, but I've listed the authors here if you wish to complete your own research. Routine activity theory is a classic, where three things are required: a motivated offender, a target, and the absence of a capable guardian or guardianship. Often people use routine activity theory to explain other types of crime, but applying it in digital environments is simple. When you think about it, social media accounts being compromised is a perfect application of this theory. A cybercriminal, or someone who has a vengeance against you, are vulnerable, or someone who is quite nonchalant about their privacy hygiene, and having poor passwords. Social learning theory refers to when people learn how to commit crimes through their interactions with others. When applied to the cyberspace, this makes sense in the context of cyberbullying and hacking. In order to feel a sense of community, individuals who commit these crimes have learned how to belong through learning, observing, and imitating behaviors of those who they admire or want to be accepted by. Control balance theory refers to when individuals may feel a lack of control in their physical life, so they go online to perpetrate cybercrimes. We see this a fair bit with involuntary celibate or incel culture, where motivations can also include thrill-seeking and ego-boosting. Particularly in cases of cyber harassment, cyber stalking, and deepfake abuse, perpetrators feel an overwhelming urge and excitement to have control over their victims, which they lack in their daily lives. Space transition theory posits that people change and behave differently when they move from one space to another. This ties in closely with the continuum of violence, where the pendulum of online to offline is a gray area and one of anonymity. The norms and practices of physical offline spaces are vastly different from those online, which leads to increased cybercrime. Financial and economic gain is a proven outcome when it comes to blackmail, extortion, frauds, and scams that are perpetrated online, and are not just limited to a singular incident. Often we find that victim survivors are re-victimized over the course of their life. And lastly, a lack of awareness and understanding. Unless they are a malicious threat actor, sometimes we find that individuals who have perpetrated one form of cybercrime may lack the knowledge to understand what they've done is a crime. I get asked this question a fair bit, but people question, why are there no solutions for preventing someone from becoming a cybercriminal? This is why it is extremely important to provide education at a foundational age, including schools, but as well as adults in universities and workplaces and organizations, where people are able to understand and grasp concepts such as cyber safety. As I take you down this path of understanding the motivations behind particular forms of cybercrime, it is equally as important for me to inform you of some of the impacts that these crimes have on victim survivors. There is a lack of community and support. Through my conversations with victim survivors, they are often alienated as a result of experiencing the abuse. Especially for those who are marginalized, there is an element of victim blaming and shaming in their communities, which means that these individuals often retreat to their own self-protective mechanisms rather than seeking support. In my own thesis, I discovered that bystanders are more likely to suggest individuals who experience cyberstalking should log off or deactivate their accounts to avoid further victimization. The economic costs of cybercrime are dastardly. Cybersecurity threats in general are ramping up to millions and billions of dollars, where interpersonal cybercrimes cost a significant amount of money for victim survivors. Consider the money that they need to spend on new devices, new homes if they are cyberstalked, criminal justice processes, legal fees, interactions with psychologists and well-being counselors, taking time off from work and other employment, just to name a few. Cognitive and overattachment. Recent instances and interactions have indicated that there is an increased over-reliance on chatbots. Companionship allows for emotional expressions in these services, as well as voice and audio content that mimics real-life human interactions. Victim survivors who are extremely vulnerable, such as young children, are likely to use AI chatbots as a substitute for community, psychological support, and are at increased risk of danger. Psychological and mental consequences. This is a given, but the effects of cybercrime on a victim survivor's psychological health is significant. Anxiety, feelings of helplessness, and depression are all common themes that have been found across pools of victim survivors. Without the right help, victim survivors are often having to deal with these internal battles themselves and may take their own lives if they are unable to cope any longer. The loss of digital trust. Victim survivors, especially those who have been significantly impacted through reputational, economic, and psychological trauma, are likely to never come back online. In an age where we are required to stay connected through digital mediums, I've spoken to victim survivors who are unable to find employment as they do not trust using the internet to find jobs, or are afraid that by using a social media platform that they might be at risk of losing what they have left. Over the last few slides, I have covered a lot of content that has likely evoked an interest in criminology, and I hope this excitement persists as you operate your daily work. However, I know that you might be curious to understand how everything I have mentioned can be translated effectively and tangibly for solutions. For all the stakeholders in this space, here are some ways forward and considerations. Digital literacy is crucial. I know everyone rambles on and on about this, but as a criminologist, I see the vital importance of making sure that the knowledge is accessible across the board. As previously mentioned, the rate at which technology is advancing means that the knowledge that you had yesterday or today might be different tomorrow. This is incredibly important. I would highly encourage you to center the victim-survivor experience with empathy, compassion, and justice. As criminologists, we understand that the continuum of violence is only amplified online, and we cannot move further in this space if we continue to assign blame and shame to those who are affected by these harms. In that vein, depending on your region, ensure to advocate for legislative reform and intersectional policies that support victim survivors. As I mentioned before, technologies are rapidly evolving, which means it takes several years for the law to catch up. Through lobbying for reform, you will elevate the voices and experiences of victim survivors who do not have the ability to do so themselves. And lastly, please support preventative solutions that identify risks beforehand. Identify groups, companies, and organizations in the technology industry and the startup sector who are working towards ethical, responsible, and safe solutions that empower victim survivors of cybercrime. Make sure these solutions have been tried, tested, and validated with victim survivors. I've seen numerous solutions in the market that are being provided without proper validation. This may exacerbate more harm than good. Lastly, I would like to end on a call for action for everyone at the conference today, but also to all who work tirelessly in this space to create change. It is a fundamental human right to have safe experiences online, no matter your age, race, sexuality, or ability. Thank you to everyone who's continuing to fight the big fight to create safer worlds for everyone. And lastly, please follow Iris on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. We also have a website and a monthly newsletter that you can subscribe to and find out more about what we do and how we can help your organization safely and effectively reduce harm for victim survivors of cyber abuse. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Actually, it was really interesting to listen to you after the first day because there was a lot of things that you talked about that carried over. Actually, the very last day, the last speech we had yesterday was about the disproportionate impacts on marginalized communities. We also had a panel that was focusing on the survivor experience. So I know it's really interesting. I mean, have you, in your work, I just want to ask, have you felt your perspective? How do you see, like, when you're working with other people, what is the difference when you're like, how do you see this criminological perspective? How do you work differently compared to others?
I think the difference that I see is that a lot of the time people, especially in my space, they think it's a very like one size fits all solution. And they're like, hey, here's our one solution that's going to solve this problem of having we're going to reduce cyberbullying with our one solution. And oftentimes I find that it's not a one size fits all. As a criminologist, I see that there needs to be multiple approaches happening in order to combat what is including like just one form of cybercrime. And it's because it's how rapidly it's evolving, right? And when I say how rapidly it's evolving, it's like we're using AI. AI can inform absolutely every single one of the cybercrimes that I mentioned, including its own forms of cybercrime. I spoke at Metaverse Safety Week last year, and now I've started to consider implications in the metaverse as well. The reason why criminological perspectives are really important is because we identified not just motivations and intent behind cybercrime, but also the failures of the criminal justice system or legal processes or institutions. So it's twofold. It's both preventative, but also reactive. And we bring it all together. And I don't see many criminological perspectives being floated in this space. I know cyber psychology is a growing space as well, and I have many like-minded colleagues in this space that are working to provide cyber psychological perspectives. But criminological, like this is our bread and butter. We literally only ever think about crime and harms, how harms need to be criminalized and how some things that are criminalized at the moment need even more advancements with legislation and regulations and policies. And I think it's really important to have a criminologist on board because I don't know whether it's something that we're taught during our degree or our work, but we intrinsically think about gaps and risks and things that are failing constantly. And it's a bit sad to say we don't see positives, but I think our brain just immediately goes to what are the disadvantages of using this? How can this actually exacerbate more harm? And while your solution might actually be positive in the long term, because that's what we look at in the long term, is this something that's viable for society?
I actually have that same problem, but about only seeing the risks because I'm from my time as a CFO, right? Something goes right. There's something back there that we're overlooking. So we have that in common. No, thank you so much. We have representatives from different countries here, so I'm looking forward to us all connecting. Yeah, we can connect across the world, and yeah, also from the ones that I mentioned yesterday. I am posting about it, so you can have a look. Yeah, thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions for Nakshatra?
Absolutely happy to take any questions. If you'd like to message me as well, connect with me on LinkedIn. Very happy to connect. My whole mission is to really, like I said, it's really important for me to determine and amplify the digital safety movement and really express that it is a fundamental human right to have safe experiences online. So anything that helps me progress that mission. So
that's what we're here for. So thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Angeline. Take care.